special message is not printed anywhere. We asked for it specifically, and Dr. Fruchtenbaum will share. But, you know, I've never done this all the years you've been coming, Arnie, and I think I'm going to do it. I'm friends with, on Facebook, and I found this on Facebook yesterday evening. Arnold Fruchtenbaum was born in 1943 in Siberia, Russia. Yulia, raise your hand. We have an international student staying with Russell and Gwen from Siberia. So you have to talk in each other's language. All right. His father, his Jewish father, was falsely accused of being a Nazi spy when he fled Poland from Hitler. And finally he's released from communist prison. With the help of the Israeli underground, in 1947, the Fruchtenbaum family escaped from behind the Iron Curtain to Germany, where they were confined to British displaced persons camps. And there, Dr. Arnold received Orthodox Jewish training. He's just a little boy at that point, from his father before they finally emigrated to New York, 1951. Before their release, a Lutheran minister had been in contact, and eventually he made contact, I think, with Chosen People Ministries is what it was. It would become now ABMJ, I think it was then, American Board of Mission to the Jews. And Arnold, eventually the contact led Arnold and his mama to the New York headquarters for ABMJ. 5 years later, same meeting brought Arnold, at bar mitzvah age 13, to saving knowledge of Jesus the Messiah. Hallelujah. What a treasure he was to become. His father opposed his beliefs and so on and so forth. You can talk to Arnie about that. That's not easy. And finally, upon graduating from high school, he's forced by his father to leave home because of his faith. 1962 began an undergraduate education, Shelton College, New Jersey. Transferred to Ohio Cedarville College, graduating with a Bachelor of Arts. I was getting ready to make my bar mitzvah in Denver in 1966, and I was actually just about to enter the National Jewish Hospital for 2 years there in Denver because of all the lung disease and stuff. But Arnie was already getting a degree in Hebrew and Greek by then in 1966. He moved to Israel where he studied archaeology, ancient history, historical geography, Ivrit, right? Hebrew at the American Institute of Holy Land Study, Hebrew University in Jerusalem. He witnessed firsthand, you could talk to him about the historic Six-Day War in 1967. Later, he entered Dallas Theological Seminary. Can anything good come out of Texas? There we go. And it did. He studied Hebrew and Old Testament. He began working with Chosen People. Later, it became ABMG. He married Marianne Amaro, a graduate of Gordon College from Massachusetts. Later, he graduated with a master's from Dallas. He and his wife went to Israel, settling in work in Jerusalem, in a local congregation of Israeli believers, so on and so forth. Draw much attention. Eventually, he had to leave Israel 1973. I still was, I think, getting out of high school then. In the next 2 years, Arnold served as minister and editor of the Chosen People magazine, which I used to read when I came to the Lord in 1973. I used to read it, and what an amazing publication. That's still a great group. He joined the staff of the Christian Jew Foundation, Dr. Half here, and people forget that you work for Dr. Half. That's a miracle in itself. But Arnold didn't last long. He was called to start his own ministry. There was a great need because of lack of discipleship, especially of young Jewish believers, and a need for intensive biblical and theological training for them. Ariel, Lion of God, was started. And so, though they had their headquarters a long time near the John Wayne Airport there in Orange County, California, praise the Lord, in these latter years they came back to San Antonio. And so Arnold is actually home now, but he's not resting. I've asked, and the Board of Elders unanimously wanted him to come and asked if he could talk about the importance of the Messianic Jewish movement and some of its pitfalls as well. So Dr. Fruchtenbaum, welcome back to San Antonio. We love you. We do have an opportunity to support Ariel Ministries, which our congregation does monthly also. But we're going to pass a plate, so to speak, at the end of the teaching. And so please be willing to share in that offering. Checks can be made out directly to ARIEL. There we go, Ariel. And before Dr. Fruchtenbaum shares, Denise and Manny, will you raise your hand and real high? This is Arnold's literal secretary and administrative aide, Denise and her husband, Denise and Manny Velarde. And they've been associated with Beth Simcha for years. And we're glad you're here and glad you're in the class afterwards. All right, God bless you, Doctor. Just share. Here's a big New American Standard. You may have the original American Standard there. All right, brother.
The topic I was asked to speak on is not exactly what's on the board, though it's going to cover the same material. It's basically how the Messianic Movement exists today, both the positives and negatives. Now, the way the situation is today is quite different than when it was first unified. Back in 1975 is probably when the Messianic Movement actually began, when the Hebrew Christian Alliance changed its name to Messianic Jewish Alliance and so on, and they moved on to establishing Messianic congregations and other forms of advancement in Jewish studies. I remember when the movement first began, the leaders were saying that the main hope of the Messianic movement, besides instilling Jewish identity to Jewish believers, is also to finally correct the church over all these different problems that developed in church history. As the Messianic movement has continued to exist and develop, it ended up facing the same theological problems as in church history. Even began to repeat some of the mistakes the church has made in church history. And on top of that, certain segments of our movement is slipping into heresy as well. But the kinds of situations we're facing are both external and internal. We have attacks coming against us from the external segment of the Messianic movement outside of us. Also, there are internal problems. Three I might mention just in passing. We'll deal with these a bit later. We have development of some heretical false teachings. We also have developed false standards of spirituality. And we even have now more and more people coming up with false different claims of Jewish identity. So basically I'm going to cover 7 points in our talk this morning, some a bit more detailed than others. Let me just begin briefly about the attacks we're getting from the outside. As